Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is how the Jewish calendar year has been turned on its head because of COVID. We are 1 year into COVID and things are better than they were months and even weeks ago, but they're still far from normal. And as a result, our Jewish life and Jewish holidays and celebrations are still not able to be celebrated as they once were, as we wish they would be. All of us remember Passover in isolation. We remember condensed Rosh Hashanah services. This coming year, hopefully, we will be able to make the transition back, not to normal, but to a new normal. Good, old-fashioned, regular normal will still take a long time if we could ever return to it. It all started around Purim. Purim is traditionally one of the most happy days of the Jewish year. Actually, more than simply a single day. Purim brings with it a month of happy days. It's a Jewish dictate. Mi shenechnas Adar marbim b'simcha. During the Hebrew month of Adar, and Purim falls on the 14th of Adar, we are instructed to be happy. Choosing costumes, baking goodies, preparing a Suda, a meal, a holiday meal for our families and friends, and are all part of the fun and festivity that is Purim. But this year, I'm not so sure. Years from now, when we tell our children and grandchildren the story of Purim, we will tell them more than the story of the beautiful Queen Esther and mean, awful, evil Haman, and his three-sided hat. We will tell them the story of the pandemic, our pandemic. Not the bubonic plague, the pandemic we lived through. Purim is the anniversary of COVID, of the COVID plague. Purim is when COVID hit. It hit the world. It hit Israel. It hit the Jewish community. It hit just around Purim last year. And nothing has been the same since. There is not one person who has not felt the pain and suffered the losses COVID has wreaked. Loss of lives, loss of income, loss of family, loss of community gatherings, loss of everyday freedoms we always took for granted. Last year, we celebrated Purim. We celebrated in groups. We wanted to celebrate the holiday, and we were mostly unaware of the dangers, the risks, the results, the deaths. And when Purim was over, the reality of what we had done, what we had naively done, struck. This year, a full year later, many people are reaching the end of their tether. They've had enough masks and social distancing. They want to be free again. They want to celebrate Purim the good old-fashioned way, but it's too soon. This year, our Purim celebrations, just like our celebrations, other celebrations, should be muted. We live in a world where people are deceived by false messages and by the media. A world where some people rely more on Facebook and pseudo-experts than on medical journals and science. Yes, vaccines have been extremely successful, but despite success, over the past 3 months in the United States, almost 500,000 people died of COVID. These past few months have been the most deadly months of the entire year, with each month progressively worse than the previous month. That's despite the vaccine. It's important to recognize it. I'm not a doomsayer. I think we will defeat the COVID, and I think it is premature to believe that we have already beaten the beast. I think it will take more time than we originally hoped, more time than we expected. So what do we do about Purim? For many families and communities, Purim is not just a day that happens once a year on the 14th of Adar. Jewish history is replete with special Purims, personal holidays that were instituted to celebrate the day that these families or communities were saved from destruction. Some of these were saved from natural disasters and some from human tyrants. Haman, if you will, has many forms and faces. For instance, in Padua, Italy in 1795, on the 11th day of Sivan, there was a major fire and the Jewish community was saved. In Tripoli, a false Purim, a Purim Kidubuni, is celebrated on the 24th day of Tevet. That's because in 1705, the governor of Tunis laid siege to Tripoli and the Jewish community. But then outside the city, a plague broke. The siege was lifted. The governor and his army left, saving the city and its people. In 1524, Ahmed Shaitan Pasha, governor of Egypt, imprisoned 12 leading Jews of Cairo. They were held for ransom. Among them was the chief rabbi, Daud ibn Abi Zimra. One day, the governor pledged that he would massacre all the Jews in Cairo as soon as he finished taking his bath. While in the bath, one of his deputies stabbed him and assassinated the governor. The Jews escaped a general massacre, and the imprisoned Jewish leaders were released on the 28th of Adar. This is known as the Purim of Cairo. The Jews of Rhodes celebrated their special Purim on the same day as the traditional Purim, on the 14th of Adar. They celebrate a double Purim because in 1840, the governor of Rhodes decided to take revenge on the Jews because they were competing with Rhodes for the sponge trade. He claimed that Jews kidnapped a Christian child, and the Jews of Rhodes were imprisoned and tortured. When the child was found alive on an island of Sira, Sultan Abd al-Majid deposed the governor of Rhodes, declared the accusation of ritual murder false. I'm not certain how we will celebrate the end of this plague, our COVID plague. Unlike many of these special Purims, it will not end on a single day. I certainly hope that by next Purim we'll be able to celebrate with family and friends. But life will never really return to normal. Our celebrations will always be a little dimmer than they once were, dimmed by the memory of those no longer here to share with us, those who were taken by this deadly plague.
Theodor Herzl, father of the Jewish state, the leader fired by an ancient vision whose strength of faith, personal charm, and immense activity renewed that vision, making it alive and dynamic. Mover of men, the inspiration of his people, who organized them into a political force and a factor in international affairs. And the vision becomes reality.
I've also been thinking about another anniversary, the anniversary of a simple act, the publication of a written pamphlet that changed the world, certainly my world, and all of your worlds too. Theodor Herzl's spectacular work, Der Judenstaat, was published in February of 1896. In this pamphlet, Herzl presented his plan for changing the Jewish people through the creation of a state. Herzl argued that a state will transform the Jewish people. The title Der Judenstaat is most often mistranslated, whereas the Jewish state is the translation we often use here. It's fundamentally wrong in terms of translation of Herzl's idea, and German. The best translation of Der Judenstaat is the state of Jews, state comprised of Jews. Herzl wanted Jews to come together. He wanted to create a mini Switzerland in the Middle East. Herzl did not want a state imbued with Judaism. He proposed that rather than one language, all languages be spoken in the new state of Jews. That way, he felt, it would bring the culture of the world to the new state. He warned that two languages should not be spoken, Hebrew and Yiddish. About Hebrew, he said, "Whom among us knows enough Hebrew to order a train ticket?" About Yiddish, he said, "Yiddish is the language of the ghetto. The new state is a rejection of the ghetto." Herzl actually went to the Sultan of Turkey and offered to balance his books, his ledgers, in exchange for giving Jews the land of Palestine. Obviously, the deal never went through that way. Theodor Herzl is the father of modern Zionism. This year commemorates the 125th anniversary of one small publication that changed the world. Not just the Jewish world, the entire world. Many people like to quote Theodor Herzl. Some do it in writing, others verbally. When you write his name, be careful. Herzl's name is German, therefore there is no E at the end of Theodor. That would anglicize his name, and that would actually make him a her, by the way. This Theodor spelled Theodor. We owe this greater thinker at least to spell his name correctly.
Therefore must you have faith, for a new and wondrous generation of Jews will arise in Israel. The sons of the Maccabees will be born to a new life.
Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from Ynet by Alex Fishman, published on February 12th, 2021. It's entitled, Israel Must Expect Every Unexpected Threat, subtitle, Analysis, while Iran has been stuck at 2 years from the bomb. For decades, and Jerusalem is basking in the glow of the Abraham Accords, the country must recall the unpredicted 2006 war and never forget dangers of domestic, socioeconomic strife. Fishman is a regular columnist for Yediot Achronot and Ynet. He writes on foreign affairs and military issues. This column is a combination of both. In this piece, about threats against Israel, which include Iran and the nuclear plan, Fishman explains that Israel needs to prepare for the worst possible scenario. This is how Fishman begins. Israel is apparently doing something right when it comes to the Iranian nuclear issue. For according to a report by the IDF's Military Intelligence Directorate released Tuesday, Iran is still 2 years away from being able to build a nuclear bomb. If everything goes smoothly, that is. The Iranian nuclear project has been going on for 40 years, and for the last 2 decades, we have been repeatedly told that the Iranians are a year or 2 from getting the bomb. This time frame is not narrowing, and that is no coincidence. It means that the covert work being done by Israel, Britain, the United States, and France is successful and must be seen through before anyone rushes to threaten Iran with war. The head of military intelligence, General Tamir Heyman, has revealed that the state of Israel has a reasonable amount of breathing room between the failure of diplomacy on Iran's nuclear aspirations and a military response to them. This is partly due to 2015 nuclear agreement brokered by former U.S. President Barack Obama, to which President Joe Biden seeks a return after it was abandoned by Donald Trump in 2018. Fishman explains why Israel cannot trust this military assessment, and that it really means nothing. He explains that Israel needs to plan for the worst possible scenario. He writes, the implication ostensibly is that given such domestic woes, there is small chance that one of them will launch a war against Israel this year. In this sense, 2021 will not be too different from 2020. In fact, it is worth pointing out here to all the experts in military intelligence that Arab countries have not waged war on Israel for several decades. The 2006 Second Lebanon War was the result of Hezbollah underestimating Israel's response about the abduction of its troops on Lebanon border. Fishman correctly explained that the policy and the attitude of the United States towards Israel are not predictable. They are simply a crapshoot. And, as he explains, internal conflicts in Israel are serious and divisive. So, as a result, and in the best defense of Israel, solutions to these threats must be clear and acted upon almost immediately. Next up is a column from the Jerusalem Post, and it was written by Herb Kanan. It was published on February 14th, 2021, and it's entitled, With U.S. Cold Shoulder, Should Israel Now Pivot Towards France? Analysis? Yes, France, that country which many Israelis eye suspiciously dating back to Charles de Gaulle's arms embargo prior to the 1967 Six-Day War. Herb Kanan is the foreign policy reporter for the Jerusalem Post, and he's the point person on all issues related to the United States. He's been with the Post for decades, and has a very keen insight. Years ago, every Friday afternoon, we used to play softball together in Jerusalem, and I remember it fondly. In this piece, Kanan is asking a critical question about the special relationship between the United States and Israel. Yes, the United States and Israel will have that special relationship. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes Israel might need more than what the United States will offer, especially if he gets the cold shoulder. So maybe Israel should look elsewhere as well. I would expand Kanan's point and even suggest that China might be another door that Israel can knock on, not just France. This is how Kanan begins. With a chill wind starting to blow toward Israel from Washington, as U.S. President Joe Biden still has not called Prime Minister Netanyahu, and his spokeswoman equivocated oddly when asked whether Israel remained an important U.S. ally. This might be the time for Israel to look at upgrading and revamping ties with France. Yes, France. That country which so many Israelis view as anti-Israel because of its almost reflexive support for Palestinian positions in international forums, and its often hypercritical condemnations of Israeli policy. Yes, France, that country which many Israelis eye suspiciously dating back to Charles de Gaulle's arms embargo just prior to the 1967 Six-Day War. Why? Because, as Oliver Rafovich, a former IDF spokesman for the foreign media, wrote in a position paper in September for the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security Studies, France's political interests currently dovetail with Israel's on multiple issues. A bit of background here. The primary reason is that France is standing up against Turkey on several fronts. They are also aligning with Greece against Turkey. France has also divorced itself from their previous behavior of linking all issues to the Palestinian cause. Kinnan concludes by paraphrasing Rafovich's saying that if France is to be successful in containing Turkey, they need Israel. He writes, "The overt alignment of Abu Dhabi, Manama, and Jerusalem offers a diplomatic and military platform for rebuilding past ties based on emergent common interests and a new outlook on the Middle East." He wrote, adding that if France's interventions in Lebanon and Libya and efforts to contain Turkey are to succeed, rapprochement with Israel is essential. This is obviously true and absolutely correct. Again, I would like to stress in my assessment that China will also be very important to engage with in terms of the Middle East through Israel. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 5 memes today, and they're memes and headlines. The first item is an actual front-page photo and headline from the New York Post. Headline writers are great punsters. They pun all the time, and the New York Post has some of the greatest of them all. Singer-songwriter Bruce Springsteen is known as the Boss, and one of his greatest songs that he wrote and performed is Born to Run. Springsteen was pulled over for DUI in Sandy Hook, New Jersey. The headline in the Post reads, "Born to Rum," with an M. For your information, by the way, his breathalyzer test was way below the limit, and the Boss was by no means drunk. The officer said he smelled of alcohol and was driving erratically. Next up is a play on how the media often inverts reality to suit their own agenda. And see the picture of the mass murderer Charles Manson, and it looks like a high school picture actually, and he looks so innocent. The caption reads, "If Charles Manson committed his crimes today, this is the photo the media would use." This is very funny, and really a spectacular point of view, and critical. Next up is a great way of viewing different attitudes of those of us who live in the northern United States and those of us who live in the southern United States when it comes to weather, especially when it comes to the first snowfall of the season. The top picture shows an orderly plowed and efficiently run highway scene. There's snow, but everything's under control. That's the north. The other picture shows the south. Cars are all over, backwards, sideways, all over the highway. One car is on fire. It's truly mayhem. Now, a very funny comment on COVID and the past year. In the palm of an open hand, we see 14 ancient coins and 2 ancient nails. The caption reads, "I just found some change in my pocket from the last time I went out." Finally, a comment on the transitions that we've made in our technical society. The newest way to store music and information is, of course, in the cloud. But remember when we used to have LPs, long-playing records with jackets and dust covers? Remember when there were enormous record stores? If you don't remember, this is what it used to look like. The meme reads, "When music wasn't in the cloud." There are many similar memes and cartoons like this one, actually. One of the most famous came from the New York Times in their section called Metropolitan Diary. It was a different time, but it makes the same point, just using different examples. A mom walking with her son as they pass a building that reads Public Library. The son asks, "What's that?" She explains, "It's a video store for books." Today, videos and video stores are also a thing of the past, like record stores. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Hamas, the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, have completely rebuilt their military apparatus in the years since the last major conflict with Israel in 2014. According to Israeli estimates, Hamas has now 7,000 rockets, 300 anti-tank missiles, 100 anti-aircraft missiles, 30,000 soldiers, and 400 naval commandos. Islamic Jihad has 6,000 rockets, dozens of drones, anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles, and 400 commandos, naval commandos. This is not good news. The border between Israel and Gaza is 30 miles long and very problematic. In 2014 alone, Israel discovered and destroyed 20 terrorist tunnels going from Gaza into Israel. With each passing year, the threats increase. Israel has been a beacon to the world on how to best deliver the COVID vaccine to millions of people. And yet there are still those who do not want to receive the vaccine shots in Israel. Vaccine evaders tout pseudoscience and pseudo-experts and parrot claims about the dangers of taking the vaccine. There are rabbis and community leaders and people with influence who advise that the vaccine leads to death and that COVID is really not so bad. Rumors are spreading that the vaccine is actually a tool of the government used to track everyone, all of their citizens. Therefore, do not take it, they say. This is all ludicrous. But there are some believers that actually believe this. Israel is spending millions of dollars now to educate the anti-vaxxers. Proponents of this idea are very slick. They couch their message in great presentations. But performances aside, their premise is incorrect. The numbers that they're using are unclear. No one knows exactly how many people are refusing the COVID vaccines, but every one of them can and will endanger countless other people. Kari Schultz is the new CEO of Teva Pharmaceuticals, and he announced that the company has been approached by, and they have approached the manufacturers of COVID vaccines to help produce more product. Demand for COVID shot is tremendous, and that demand is only increasing. Every country in the world needs to have their residents inoculated and vaccinated, and the creators of the vaccine need more and more vaccine. They cannot keep up with the need, so they are looking for help. Teva is an international company. It was created in Israel, of course. It manufactures in Israel and all across the world. Israel is one of its major R&D centers, but they have factories across the world. This is a very good idea. The shortage of vaccines is due to the inability to produce enough vaccines fast enough. A contract between Teva, the largest producer of generic drugs in the world, with whichever company needs the help, or several of them, will be a win-win situation for every one of us in the world today. Iranian media is reporting that, and has reported, that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has 340 new small attack boats. Some of the boats are from England, and they are called Blade Runner. Some are from China, and they're called China Cat. Some are from North Korea, and they're called the Taedong B. These are attack boats with the capability of going even underwater, the Taedong B. Some of the boats were filmed and photographed. Some had drones attached to them. Others have rocket launchers attached. Part of the strength of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard comes from their fleet of small boats that travel under the radar, and an additional 340 of these attack boats would be a massive upgrade to their fleet. But many analysts, including myself, are doubting the veracity of the claim as reported by the Iranian media. Some doubt that all 350 boats are actually new, or 340 boats are actually new. Others doubt that there are even 340 boats at all. It might be a big fake. Iran enjoys the game of intimidation. Israel has signed on to an agreement to import natural gas to Gaza. The agreement was signed between Israel, Qatar, the United States, and the European Union. The deal was brokered by Qatar. The agreement has two parts. Part one involves Israel providing natural gas to the Palestinian Authority. Part two includes the construction of a pipeline from Israel to Gaza. The European Union and Qatar will allocate the money for the pipeline. Israel has already signed contracts with Egypt, Jordan, so it makes sense that they should supply natural gas to Gaza too. It's hard to imagine, but Israel is now a major player in the supply of natural gas in the region. Israel's borders with her neighbors are, first and foremost, security risks. They are also the point of entry for many illegal drugs. When an Israeli soldier was injured in a shootout on the Egyptian border, the reason was clear. The Egyptian army and drug smugglers were in a shootout. They were shooting at each other when the Israelis arrived. One soldier was not hit by a bullet, but by shrapnel. In the end, the drug smugglers were stopped. Most drugs enter Israel through its borders, very often from the Egyptian border. Bedouins excel at drug smuggling. For Bedouins, borders do not exist. It's a cultural issue. Crossing borders and delivering product is not a violation of Bedouin tradition. This tradition must be broken. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Herzl had some very strange ideas about his Jewish state. Most of them, thankfully, were not adopted. You heard about his ideas of language in Hebrew. Another example was his idea of a flag for the state. It was to be 7 5-pointed gold stars in a circle, representing a 7-hour workday. That would have been impressive, but not effective at all. Herzl believed that the poor and the working class should first come to Israel and build the state. And when it was finished, the elite and the wealthy should come afterwards. He believed that it should be an aristocratic republic where the wealthy controlled everything and ran everything. Herzl negotiated with kings and kaisers and sultans to get them on board to support the cause of the Jewish state. His ultimate objective, though, was to solve the problem of anti-Semitism. His entire thesis was that if the Jews were removed from other countries, especially Jewish-looking Jews, if they were removed from hateful places like Europe, there would be no need to hate Jews. An interesting hypothesis, but totally wrong. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.